or anybody says the government's not the solution, it's the problem, well, then you're telling me that people are a problem, because this is still the people's government, and the government needs to serve the people, not the other way around. And so, and those people that get elected and say they don't like the government, then get out of government, because we got to make it work.
And welcome to the East Anchorage Book Club podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Gray. Today on the show, retiring Alaska State House Majority Leader Chris Tuck. He became a Democrat just prior to his first run for office in 2004. Although his work as a union organizer might have made the Democratic Party seem like a natural fit, his abortion views do not. After 14 years in the House, Tuck talks about his experiences in that institution, including his efforts to hold Representative David Eastman accountable. We end today by discussing why Chris did not seek re-election. Chris Tuck, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us about your childhood.
Well, I was born in Cap, California. My mom was raised in Antioch, Alaska. And then she met my dad. He was a drummer at a country band. Chased him down to California, got pregnant with me. And then we moved in with my great grandmother. And then she never did marry my dad. And then got married. We had my little brother, and we got into a family that was...
So it was your half-brother.
Half-brother.
Gotcha.
And then she married an older gentleman that was much older than her. As a matter of fact, I think his oldest daughter was only a couple of years younger than my mom. And he was a violent alcoholic. He had 2 boys and 2 girls. And I was the redheaded stepchild, right? Because I was the one that it wasn't accepted at all. My little brother was accepted. And because of the violence and...
Because he was like the blood child?
Blood child of their dad. Same dad. Different mom, same dad. But I didn't have the same mom or the same dad. Fortunately, my mom had the strength and basically left a note saying, pick up the car at the airport. And we got ourselves back to Alaska and getting settled in. So back then I was under the last name Messis. My mom was Tuck. My little brother was Tuck because of the marriage that she was in. And then when we got to Alaska, she shipped me up to Tananall, where I lived with my grandparents until she got settled in with my little brother. And then when she got settled in, and then I went, my first year of school was up in Tananall, Alaska. Great experience, by the way. But I was in kindergarten, but I do remember it very vividly. And then came back down to Anchorage with my mom, and she enrolled me in the Anchorage School District as Chris Tuck. So I have my Social Security under Tuck, and my last name was Tuck all the way up until I got elected to the legislature. And then the Republican Party with Kevin Clarkson had that lawsuit against me saying I was deceiving the voters. And then I legally changed my name to Tuck shortly after that. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know my last name was Messis until I went to get my driving permit, and I discovered it then.
Did you ever meet your birth father?
I did. I met him the first time in 2004. I was coming out of church, and No, let me back up a little bit. It was actually prior to that. I can't remember what year. It was 1992. It was 1992. I met him briefly. My family loves the Lackawanna. We've been going to Lackawanna since before. My family has since before I was born. And it was a frequent place where my mom would go with my dad. And we were there for my grandfather's funeral. Not funeral, but just after it's all the family together, dinner. And there was a family behind me that I couldn't see. And I was at the head of the table with all my family members. And then my mom goes, oh, you want to see what your dad would look like if he was around? And then my 2 aunts were talking. I said, I think that's them. I think that's him. And I kind of turned around over my shoulder and kind of glanced. But I was really embarrassed with his family because my aunts and my mom and everybody are staring over there. I was like, hey, knock it off, let the guy eat a piece. And then when he got up to leave, he was smart, because he let his family go out ahead of him, and then he lingered back in case there was a scene. And my mom hadn't talked to him in 25 years and said, this is your son, and pointed right at me. He goes, oh, hey, he knew my name. He's still over off of 1950 Olympic Drive. Yes, blah, 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 blah. That was basically it. Hadn't talked to him until 2004.
So that funeral was in California?
The California was in Anchorage.
That Lackawanna. He was right. I was making sure. So he was up here.
Yeah. So he actually moved back to Alaska, and he was a correctional officer in the city of Ketchikan.
Okay.
So I don't know what year that was. I don't know when he came back, but yeah, he was in Alaska at that time. And that's how he knew where I was. Being a correctional officer, he has access to records.
So he looked you up.
He must have. Well, he knew. Yeah. He must have been following me and looked me up, curious.
But wasn't communicating with your mom.
No, not at all. And so then I was coming out of church, and I got this voicemail, and hey, this is your dad. I'm here in Anchorage. I would like to meet up with you and this and that. And I looked at my son and I said, hey, Devin, you want to meet your grandpa? And he goes, sure. So he went out. He was hanging out with some friends of his that was also retired as a correctional officer. He had just retired. And they were getting ready to get their motorhomes all together and their motorcycles and move to Colorado. And then after being elected in the legislature, going to the CSG, Council of State Governments, Western Legislative Academy, I happened to be going to Colorado Springs. And while I was down in Colorado Springs, I looked him up and got a chance to meet my grandmother, who was 96 at the time.
Wow.
And so I got a chance to meet and then actually go over history, go over photographs, and go all over all the stuff that I should have asked prior, but never did.
Do you still have contact?
He passed away. He passed away about 2 years ago on the day, the exact day that my grandmother passed away. Yeah. So it's actually been about, did I say 2 years? No, it's been about 4 years now.
Did he have other children?
He did. So I'm one of 11. So he had a large family. I thought growing up that I was like one of the older ones. No, I was actually one of the younger ones. And that was the deal. My mom found out that not only was he married, but he was married to two women at the same time. One was a legitimate marriage. One was to get a woman into citizenship from Mexico. They're both names happen to be Mary. So back then in the 70s and stuff is, you were over there.
Have you met your siblings?
I met one. So at his funeral, only my oldest brother was able to attend. Nobody else was able to attend.
And you attended?
Yes, I did.
Wow. So you had 11 kids and 2 came, and I guess 9 didn't.
Yeah. So I have one younger sister. I have also a sister who passed away in a suspicious car accident. Car ended up in the river and body not found. But so that was that's basically to tell you the truth, I couldn't tell you how many of them were male or female. I mean, I know he told me at one time, but it's just one of those things that.
Well, the one sibling that was at the funeral, do you stay in contact?
No, I had not since then. Wonderful family, and he's from the Colorado area as well. And apparently my family originated in the Colorado.
Did your dad have any feelings about you not having his last name? Or
He did. He actually mentioned it one time. And that was in 2012 when he found out that I had changed my name. And he was just a small little expression of disappointment, saying, yeah, I kind of wish you would have hung on to my name, which I thought was kind of odd since he was never involved.
Mm-hmm.
But he must have been proud for him to say that.
So you graduated from high school in Anchorage?
Diamond High, class of 84.
Wow. And then you became an electrician.
Yeah. So right out of high school, I started working for Brown's Electric in the warehouse. And I went to Arizona State University. And then when I came back, my first year of Arizona State University, all my friends that were working at Brown's were there working for Ready Electric and said, hey, you're hiring. You got to come work for us. And so I started working for Ready Electric. Did not go back to Arizona State University, continued working. And then times got tough in the late 80s. I ended up going from Ready to Alyeska Electric. Times got tough. Alyeska went non-union. I did not go non-union with Alyeska. I went back to being a waiter, which I was during my days at Arizona State University. And so I went back to being a waiter. And then I got a job opportunity working up in Fairbanks, tearing down the old Fort Wainwright power plant up there. And so I went and got my asbestos certification, did all the asbestos removal. And that place was like an asbestos museum. Everything was asbestos in there. The tile, the sidings, the gaskets, insulation, of course, everything in there. So once we gutted that out and they found out that I can use a torch, and I was equipment operator, which I got from working at Ready. I stayed on for the demolition part. And then from there, went down to Washington State and tore down the old Weyerhaeuser smokestack on the way from Enumclaw to Crystal Mountain. and then I had some turbines and stuff there. And then I went down to California, worked on Terminal Island on a demolition job, the old World War II Lockheed airplane manufacturing plant in Burbank. Awesome project. And then worked in the Franciscan tile factory that was down there too. Really famous ceramic tile.
So I want to pause. So did you have a constitutional feeling that you wouldn't work for a non-union company? Like, were you pretty like I'm a union man, I'm not going to work non-union?
I was indoctrinated working for Radio Electric. I mostly hung out with a lot of power linemen, and linemen within the IBEW are pretty staunch, even though I was applying for the wireman program. And so it took me 8 years of applying before I got accepted for the apprenticeship program. My first application was in 1985, and I got accepted in 1993. And so when I started applying, and just, back then, Union Ditsu was pretty strong in the state of Alaska. It's really what built Alaska. And so when they went non-union, I just, I saw what everybody was doing for me. And at that time too, remember 1985 was a Chugach electric strike. And I got asked to go cross a picket line and go work at that utility. And I could have been making huge money just being 19, 20 years old. But I refused to do that back then as well because of my principles.
My understanding in the brief research I've done on you is that you were nonpartisan or independent up until you decided to run.
Yeah, so the day that I filed to run for political office was the day that I did file as a Democrat. And prior to that, because I did live in a very Republican district, at that time it was 2.1 Republicans to 1 Democrat. I don't think that everybody falls into one category or another category. As a matter of fact, I think it's a big mistake to follow the whole party agenda, hook, line, and sinker. And so I first met Tom Begich in discussing what party I should run, whether I should run or not, because there was Tom is the one that helped redistrict this nation, him and Joe Buchanan.
And this would have been the 2000 to 2002 redistricting.
Yes.
And you were running in 2004 the first time.
Right. So, but I made my decision in 2003.
Okay.
Prior to that, it took me 10 months to decide which party I was going to run under.
Okay.
And so I had the 3-hour discussion with him, Casa Grande, which was across from the Sears Mall at the time. And it was a 3-hour hot sunny day. We sat outside and chatted. And then I talked. So he told me, he says, "Man, Chris, we redistricted the Acres Bowl area there. We put all the riffraff in this one little small little pocket so we can win seats around there. Never expecting someone to win or run. I'm sorry, in the middle there." And he did.
And by riffraff, they mean like Republican riffraff.
Yes, yeah, Republican riffraff, conservative riffraff.
Yes.
And but I want to address that real quick too. So, so he put them all in that same area. I made up my mind on how I was going to run, and he said he didn't think there was any way possible a Democrat was going to win that area for up to eight years, because
he felt until the next redistricting, basically.
Almost to the redistricting. Joe McKinnon was the one that apologized to me and said, "Hey," he was a former legislator too. He said, "Hey, we never expect anyone to run that area." And he used the term riffraff and put all the riffraff in there. But let me say this. It was the Republicans in office that helped me decide to run as a Democrat. And the reason why is because during those years we had the Bush administration, this attitude of, if you're not for us, you're against us, left me no room for the great things I wanted to do for Alaska. And so the Democratic Party is very embracing and very welcoming. And when they went after Bob Lynn for voting to protect the senior longevity bonus program, and I think he exposed that the caucus at that time, Republican-led caucus legislature, had a pact with Frank Murkowski, Governor Murkowski, to be locked in step with one another and be bound in their decisions. When he broke away, not only did they strip him of his chairmanship, but then they had somebody run against their own party member. Mm-hmm. And then same thing happened with Nancy Dalsert, when she voted to protect the permanent fund dividend. They did the same thing. They put her in a tiny little room closet of an office, which ended up being my first office when I got elected, and stripped her of her chairmanship as well. And I thought, nah, I don't need to be living like that. And it's been a great decision. I tell you, I've got good friends on both sides, but I like the idea of sharing ideas and being able to have open dialogue without being shut down. Because I don't claim to have all the ideas, but I know through dialogue and discussions that we can come up with some really good ideas. So that's been always my goal, serving in the legislature, was to bring faith in government once again, to know that we are still of the people, by the people, and for the people. And when Republicans or anybody says government's not the solution, it's the problem, well, then you're telling me that people are the problem, because this is still the people's government, and the government needs to serve the people, not the other way around. And so, and those people that get elected and say they don't like the government, then get out of government, because we got to make it work.
So something that makes you very special is, people would say if there was one litmus test to say whether somebody's going to be a Republican or a Democrat, it would be their position on abortion. And I remember a few years ago actually saying, well, we don't really have pro-life Democrats anymore. And everyone at the table was like, well, we have Chris Tuck. And so I think that did put you into a very special box. I'm just sure that you had to have had like debates with others, and that you were in the wrong party because of that one issue.
That's a very emotional issue. That's a very touchy issue. And for many, it's a lot of, it is the one issue that they vote one way or the other. And so, yes, I am pro-life. But my attack, or I don't even say attack, my method of reducing abortions isn't to make it illegal as much as it is to make it obsolete. And I think one of the I guess it's kind of like Bill Clinton. If we're going to have abortions, make sure they're safe and legal. The problem that I have with because whether it's legal or not, if nobody's having it, then so I want to make adoptions more available. I want to make prenatal care more available. I want to make it so that when a young woman is faced with a pregnancy, she doesn't have to quit school. She doesn't have to quit her job. She can successfully bring up a child. And, it takes more than one to raise a child. When I served on the Acre School District School Board, we discovered through our ABCs, acknowledgments, beliefs, and commitments, this exercise that we did, that it really does take 5 adults to raise a child. It's the traditional ways, I guess, is 2 parents, 2 grandparents, and a teacher, but it can be any combination. It can be grandparents and an uncle and the janitor at school. It can be your neighbors that are there. It can be anybody.
Or your mom's best friend's husband.
Or my mom's best friend's husband. Or my mom's other friend that, he passed away a few years ago, John Cannon, who was, my mentor always growing up. He sent me to Alaska Fine Arts Camp. He taught me how to play chess. He did all the things that a dad would do in bringing up a child.
You ran against Ralph Samuels twice and lost. What was that experience like? You kind of knew that was going to happen because they told you that it had been redistricted in such a way that it was going to be impossible for a Democrat to win, but he ran anyway. So tell us about that. What motivated you to do it?
I'm kind of a purpose-driven guy, and it would have been a lot easier. Ralph used to give me a hard time about it too. It's always easy to run as a Republican. These guys run into each other, talking. He'd always have a bright smile on his face and remind me of that, because he knew I had that. It took me a while to make that decision. And so one of the things that I did in running is I wanted to make sure we had accountability. And by somebody running unopposed, they really have accountability. And I saw how there was attempts to pass a lot of bad legislation through people who were safe in their districts. So the best way I thought that we can talk about the issues, and highlight the issues and make sure that we have better balance, even though I may not win, is to really create that accountability. The first time I ran, I got 38% of the vote. And I remember I was really offended, right? And I remember someone telling me, well, if you want to be a politician, because they were trying to talk me to run for school board. If you want to be a politician, then you should, run for the school board and this and that. And I said, my vision was for the state of Alaska at that time, and I was a little bit testy and I was a little bit offended because I wasn't running to be a politician. I was running to make a difference. And win or lose, I was making a difference. We were talking about issues that were normally pushed under the rug. We were highlighting things. And so I was a little bit offended when they had said that. I ran a second time. Now, but after my first election, to be totally upfront, after my first election, people would ask me, are you running again? And I said, you bet I am. But deep down, I was like, yeah. I mean, I was like, yeah, because it takes a lot out of you as you are. Yeah, it takes a ton out of you. And I wasn't running because I thought it was a nifty thing to do. I was running to win and to make a difference. And so then after my my next election, 2006 election, I went from 38% to 46%. And so then I was kind of getting closer to striking range.
So, I've only run for office once.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But the most negative part for me was dealing, you're going to have attacks and that sort of stuff. But, it's a pretty nasty, negative campaigning against you. But I listened to an interview with Ralph Samuels today, and he doesn't sound like the type to do nasty campaigning against you. Was there any negative ads or like personal?
There's negative ads, but not coming from Ralph. And then Ralph, you're right. Ralph isn't that kind of guy. And he's pretty happy-go-lucky person. We actually get along. I mean, there's times when we don't get along, but for the most part, we really do get along. I remember our first lunch that we had when Lone Star was still open. We had a lunch there and we got to know each other. It's like, yeah, he's not such a bad guy. And I know we walk away thinking I'm probably not such a bad guy either. And as a matter of fact, when we were done with our campaigns, he'd go pick up all my signs and as well as his signs. I pick up all of his signs as well as my signs. And then we get together and we throw my signs in the back of my truck and his signs in the back of his truck. It was cordial.
So 2008, Bronson Fry was going to be the Democratic candidate. How did that come about?
Well, Bronson, we went to a Paul Wellstone training class. And Bronson was, he started off as being an organizer with the Painters Union, which ended up being the Allied Trades, International Union of Allied Trades, Painters and Allied Trades. And so he did really well in that class. And so everybody was focusing on Bronson. And everybody was wanting him. And then Bronson came to me because he always looked up to me and always came to me for advice and said, hey, what do I do? And this and that. And I said, do not let them talk you into anything you do not want to do. And then we talked about it a little bit further. And then he said, I'm thinking about, I'd like to do it, but I don't have the commitment that they...
He must have been a baby, by the way.
He was 22, 23.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, here's the deal. How much can you commit? And so I commit to this and this and that and everything else. That's all right. So I helped him out. I got him going. And then things happened. Things changed with his union, and he got amalgamated with the Fairbanks Union. And even if he were to run, he wouldn't be able to serve. So that's when he says, hey, I'm going to have to step out. I said, all right. So the party pulled him out and put me in as replacement.
Well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, he made a choice because, couldn't he have just quit the union job to serve?
Yeah, but you got to realize this is a citizen legislature.
Yeah.
Who quits their job to serve? Mm-hmm. We still have to make a living. We still have to make money. Mm-hmm. And it's not that easy. And people that do that, I'm really amazed that they can. And no, this is a citizen legislature. And if you hope that your occupation allows you to serve, it's not that easy. It's a little bit really on the rare side that someone can't do that. Mm-hmm. If I happen to be a firefighter and serve in the legislature at the same time,
right?
You'll never see a firefighter,
right?
Be a legislator
because you got to take whatever profession you're in. You got to take 5 months off,
right? Yeah.
Well, you won. So I kind of know the story. It was like a few minutes before the filing deadline. They had to sub you out.
Yeah, I'll tell you, that's great. So, so we're sitting in Bronson's vehicle, and at that time, Patty Higgins was the chair of the party, and so it's up to her to do that. And it was 4:58 before she pulled up and ran in. But the whole time I was like bugging Bronson. Oh man, it looks like you're gonna have to go all the way now, dude. You're gonna have to go all the way. I was bugging him. He was sweating it and sweating it. She came in at the last second, went in there and changed. It wasn't planned to be at the last second. We don't know why it was so delayed, but it ended up being just seconds before the filing deadline.
And that was 2008. That was the year Obama won. That's the year you won. I guess it was an easier race because you weren't running against Ralph Samuels, or with you. Still, the momentum was there anyway. You were going to win.
Well, I wouldn't say that because the night of the election I won. The morning election I lost, and it came down to the absentee votes. It came down to the absentee votes for District 29, my district, to determine my election, but also came down to my district, District 29, for the outcome of Senator Begich. Mark Begich, that time gets Senator.
Oh,
yeah, Stevens. So it came down to both. And I'll tell you, the one thing that gave me hope in being able to win this district was seeing how Mark Begich's returns in this district was. And he was always able to win this district. So I knew there was a opportunity there. So the night of the election, when they counted this as, not the night of the election, but after they, going through all the process, all the values, usually a week afterwards, and they finally counted our district, the very last one. When I was so kind of competitive, so I felt like that if I can do better than Mark can in that scene, in that area, that I can definitely win. But I was really fatigued. I was really tired. I worked super hard through that whole thing. And then we had to go through this process. I really was sleep deprived. And they, when I came out with the ticket and it showed that I won by exactly 200 votes, I didn't look at the ticket to see if I won. I looked at the ticket to see how I did next to Mark. And the woman who had worked for Mark Begich's campaign, she goes, "Well, aren't you happy you won? You won." But I was looking at his and realized that I did not do as well as he went by. Oh, I don't even remember. It was probably about 100 and some votes, for that. He won by a lot more than that, thousands in overall the state. But I'm just looking at in my district, for that district. And then it's just like, oh yeah, I won. And another thing that kind of caught me off guard, the night of the election when I was ahead, and the news had microphones in front of my face saying, "Hey, what do you think about the election, this and that?" I wasn't even thinking about my own election. I was like, "Oh, I can't believe it. We got our first black president." I was talking about Obama. I wasn't even talking about me. No. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, no, this is great too. It's great too." But yeah, it was just, the other things were just seemed more, as important, more important at the time. And, but yeah, that was when the Republican Party had that lawsuit against me. And they had filed it. And I remember Channel 2 when they were getting set up to do the interview that night when the election results were coming in. They said, hey, before we even get on camera, they said, there's other elections that are tighter than yours. And there was. Pete Peterson's race was tight. And but why are they coming after you so hard? And I never really thought about it. And but after I said it, I think this is true. As you look at a map, I was penetrating right down the Republican stronghold in South Anchorage. I was dividing it all the way down. No one had won that far south as a Democrat in those days. And that's when they redistricted, they pushed me up and pushed me over to take some of that territory back. But that's, I believe, was the reason why they were so panicked with me going into that area.
How were your first 2 years in the legislature like?
It was eye-opening. But remember, when I began serving in the legislature, I had served on the school board. And after going from the school board to really
when did you serve in the school board?
So after the 2006 election, it was 2007 to 2009.
Gotcha.
And so when I got sworn in, the school board is one of those positions you don't get a whole lot of recognition for. You don't get a whole lot of appreciation, but it's a lot of good work. You're affecting families, you're affecting children, and you're really building the future of Alaska. It's a noble position. And then you go from there to the Alaska legislature, which tends to be the most adolescent organization you'll ever be involved with. I had a little bit of buyer's remorse.
You missed your time on the school board.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when I had to go back to serve my last day of the school board, because I was already down in Juneau, getting my office set up, going through new member orientation, all that stuff, and I had to fly back to serve my last board meeting. It didn't hit me to the last few seconds. And then I got choked up and talking about my appreciation of serving on the school board and all the work that we did, because there was some alignments you never expected on the school board, and I felt like I really brought people together. And so you get kind of choked up, and so I'm got choked up, and my eyes are teary eyed, and I look over and I see Jeff Friedman. He's kind of getting choked up as well. And I look over at John Steiner. John Steiner won't even look at me because you don't want to see a ton of crowing, because then you go get choked up too. Nobody wants to break. And so that was a heavy moment. That was and it just came onto me all of a sudden. I was going through the motions so fast. I'd never realized the impact of that being my last night on the school board, and realizing really the important work that we did and how much it meant to me. So my first 2 years in the legislature was also full of accomplishments. I was always told that there's no way a minority member was ever going to pass major legislation. And Les Guerra, because coming off school board, I was a big, huge proponent of pre-K, turned me on to a parents as teachers bill. I didn't even know what parents as teachers about. And I thought that the title was kind of precarious. I was kind of, wonder what that's all about. Well, the more I learned about parents as teachers, man, it fits Alaska perfectly as a cost-effective way of delivering education. But instead of bringing young children into brick and mortar, we're educating the parents on how to take advantage of their child's brain developing those early stages, because it's so high impact, and that really the parents are ultimately responsible for the education of their children, whether it's in public school, private school, or homeschool. And so, and then once you get parents involved early in their child's education, that was what makes successes later on in life. So I was able to pass that bill, and it was one miracle after another miracle on that bill. But I was able to pass that bill out of the House 32-5 as a freshman, a major piece of legislation.
Wow.
So I had some accomplishments, and in doing so, I had a watchful eye on me from majority members. And there was talks with majority members back then about forming a new coalition. And the day after our last day of session, I got together with a bunch of them because they saw potential in me.
You're kind of famous for telling jokes and using jokes to kind of break tension and try to draw people together. Can you talk a little bit about that? Can you tell us a joke?
Well, I can tell you a joke that got me in trouble on the floor.
Okay.
My freshman year, on the last day of session of my first term. So you've heard that, there's two things, Mark Twain quote, and I'm paraphrasing. There's two things you don't want to see made happen, because if you did, it'd make you sick. And that is sausage and legislation. And so we had this House Bill 154, I believe it was, might have been House Bill 134. I think it was House Bill 154, the cruise ship discharge bill that was happening. And so we were lighting after Alaskans had voted on a cruise ship initiative, demanding clean water coming off the ships and everything else. They were trying to relax those rules. And so on the last day of session, I happened to write a note to Scott Kawasaki. We both sat in the back next to each other. I said, "It's okay to say turd on the House floor." And I passed it over to him because I had this speech in my mind. And right when I passed it over to him, Chenault calls me, the speaker calls me. And so my subject was, because this is under special orders, my subject was freshman experience. And I talked about how I really appreciated everybody's unique experience, their individual passions and how it all came together in this sausage making process. Although at times I thought we were just making one big giant turd. And Cog, the rules chair, because he's going to call me out of order, he raised his microphone, and I saw that in the corner of my eye. And I said, and also, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the rules chair and you yourself for having patience with me being a freshman and making mistakes now and then. And then I said, but don't worry, we have House Bill 154 to help clean it all up. And that was the cruise ship discharge bill because it had to take that place. Oh, yeah, they laughed. They laughed. However, they laughed, but there was a radio ad that they came out against me with my own voice talking about that. And the ad basically said, which representative, talking about disrespect to the institution. And this isn't the frat house. This is the state house. Mm. And all my friends that ever heard that radio ad attacking me would bust up laughing because they were there during that time when it all went down.
So 2016, Trump was elected. You guys actually formed your first coalition, a majority coalition, bipartisan. And that was also the year that David Eastman was elected. And this past year became known as like the David Eastman Show. And there was a lot of pressure.
I don't know if there was ever one year more than the other there was a David Eastman Show, but yes.
Right.
But if it was another David Eastman Show.
Yes, another David Eastman Show. And so I'm wondering if you can walk us through some of the decision making, because there was some pressure. There was particularly a few members of the public who were they were like really pressuring hard on social media and newspapers, writing letters to the editor that they wanted David Eastman expelled or they wanted him removed from his committees. They wanted the legislature to take action. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like as the majority leader navigating what the pressure was from outside versus what was happening inside and how that stuff went down?
Well, we had, there's multiple reasons that people did not like David Eastman. And there was a group, and forgive me, I don't remember where the group was, that was coming together to try to get him on the insurrectionist charges.
For being part of the Oath Keepers.
For being part of the Oath Keepers, not necessarily doing any insurrectionist activity. And but they had other reasons than that. They just focused on that right there, and it was emotional for them because there is one of the questions that they asked me is that, do you think that David Eastman is a white supremacist? And I said, well, whether he is or he isn't, he's definitely sending signals out there. It's just hard to tell because if you remember, David Eastman also said that he associated President Biden with Adolf Hitler. Well, does he like Biden? No, I don't think he likes Biden. So you can say they probably does. I mean, the thing is, he walks the line, right? And he likes to stir things up, and it works, and it brings people to emotional fervor where they want to see something happen to the guy, knowing that they can't get him unelected. So yeah, there was we actually looked at it because of the January 6th activities, and our Alaska State Constitution's pretty clear that if you're part of an organization that tries to overthrow the government in any way, just by association. But the problem that we had during that time, I'm the only one who made the motion. By the way, I made the motion on the floor to remove my own committees until we can come up with a clear conclusion so we can keep our institution protected if any such activity was going to happen on us, or to keep information concealed. Because prior to all this going down, Representative Eastman did have an ethics violation where in the ethics committee, he had disclosed some stuff that was only for executive members. And any member can go to any executive session that takes place. And he just happened to be on the committee also, but he revealed some information to a reporter that was not. So I'm the one that made the motion on that floor too, to remove him from committees. Those activities had never happened before. I'm the one that been set precedent on making that happen. And so I'm not afraid to stand up where I need to stand up. And where action needs to happen, action needs to happen. But on that particular day, when we tried to remove those committees, we did have 21 votes to do such activity. But there was a couple of our members that thought it would be wise to let the minority caucus and try to figure things out, thinking that we can get more votes out of it. And then I can tell that there was minority members that said, no, let's just take the vote. But there was hesitation. And because of the hesitation, we lost momentum on that. And I know that there is that this particular organization, and I'm sorry, I do not remember, and other individual people that wanted us to take the vote because they wanted to go after those who weren't going to vote for it. So the only purpose wasn't to get them off committees. They wanted to expose people, and I'm not motivated that way.
So kind of flash forwarding till now, like there's a trial happening basically to decide whether or not he is a legitimate candidate because of his membership in the Oath Keepers. And I think there is some fear from some, at least, that we're going to have the David Eastman show again if he wins the case, because we still have the same people in the public saying that something needs to be done.
Just remember,
he won an election.
Another thing that happened is I was chair of military veterans affairs. As chair of military veterans affairs, I took it upon myself to do an informational hearings on who is Oath Keepers. I didn't even know who Oath Keepers was until all of this was coming about. And so we had a series of hearings. I met with minority members and said, hey, this is what it's not an insurrection. It is not a trial. And I met with them and I let them know what my intent was going to be and how we're going to do things and the decorum, because I was more concerned about the decorum. And we weren't going to have David Eastman testify because that's what he likes, that type of attention. But this wasn't that type of hearings. It was all about, fact checking, fact finding, and to see how Congress was doing their investigation. The Alaska State Legislature does not have the resources to investigate something like that. We don't. We have to wait for the feds to do their part. And then we can, once the decision is made. So unfortunately, the minority members never showed up. And I thought that was pretty indecent of them, where I was sharing with them how things were going to go and everything else. And I don't blame them for doing that, but they could have decency to say that, hey, we're not going to attend the meetings if you don't mind. And I'm totally cool with that because we don't need a quorum. There's no decisions to be made.
Do you think it sent a message that they, didn't support the hearings, that they weren't interested in the hearings, that they thought they were frivolous or unimportant? I mean, by them not showing up?
Well, if I put myself in their situation, they want to be a strong caucus. And it only takes one bad apple to really mess things up in the caucus. And we know pretty much how that happens. And so I think at that time, with all the discourse that was taking place, and because I think that they just didn't want to, I don't think that they wanted to show sides one way or the other.
There has been at least one person who said that they felt that the majority made decisions to maintain their majority, and that expelling David Eastman would, Republicans who had decided to caucus with majority might be willing to go back because...
Oh, no, that's not the case at all.
I just wanted to respond to that because there have some who said that.
It's the first time I've ever heard of this.
Well, some people have said that David Eastman serves a good purpose for the Democrats because he helps to maintain their majority caucus, because there are people who refuse to caucus with him, and that helps Democrats. And that there's been strategic...
Well, that I would deny.
Right.
But to say at that situation that we were protecting Republicans or Republicans, I mean, that sounds like someone from the outside looking in, not really knowing what's going on. That sounds like someone trying to put some dots together.
So in February this past year, you announced that you were going to run for Senator Alvy Gray Jackson's state Senate seat, because she had announced that she was going to run for the U.S. Senate seat held by Senator Lisa Murkowski. Um, but then when she decided not to run for that seat after all, and she was going to run for her state Senate seat, redistricting happened. You ended up in a House district with Andy Josephson. And, it's ranked choice voting. So you both could have run, and you wouldn't necessarily been running against each other. I mean, I guess you are, but, I guess if you don't mind, just giving us a little insight into
This last decision making and whether I was going to run or not.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was actually asked to run for Congress, and I was possibly looking for Congress. And then, but all this rests upon having a 7-year-old daughter. And there's no way I would be able to do anything like that unless I knew her mom was on board. And in some ways, I thought maybe, she's the executive director for Americans for Prosperity. Somehow that she was going to get switched down to Washington, D.C., then that would be a no-brainer. But I kind of entertained the idea for a little bit because I do think I would do a great job down there. I've been solicited over a period of time. And then when I made my decision on that, no, I'm not going to do it. Then the other option was the open Senate seat, potentially open Senate seat. Mm-hmm. Nobody knew what the pairings were going to be at the time. And then Andy Josephson, we already knew that we were paired together. And I told Andy, I said, yeah, he goes, I really want to, continue serving this and that. I said, this is probably a good time for me to spend more time with my daughter. And I saw running for the Senate as an opportunity to spend more time with my daughter because I'm not running every other year. And in this district, you saw how hard Andy Josephson had to work. He ran every year, not every other year. People are like, oh, he's not doing much. It's like, I've been campaigning. I don't stop campaigning. I door knock my newsletters and every coffee hours. I do my coffee hours. I do my constant communications. And I do my routine check-ins with the district. And I think that's what keeps me grounded as well.
It's a lot of work. And your daughter's mom is not going to be in D.C.?
No, she's not. Nothing to do with Acres. And and being in the Senate, I have to run every other year. And then, of course, the parents ended up, not running, and then I got paired up with LV. Then I thought, well, that was a good time. And my little girl is so delighted, so happy, so relieved. We were at a get together with a bunch of friends, and she goes, "Yeah, when we go back down to Juneau, blah 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 blah." And I let her speak, and afterwards I pulled her aside and said, "Penelope, Dad's not going back down to Juneau. I said, oh, no, we go down to visit. No, but you're not going to go down to her work. No, I just want to make sure you're okay. I just make sure we understand." Yeah. And so, she's elated. And I am too. I'm looking forward to going snow machining. I'm looking forward to skiing. I'm looking forward to even going on vacations now and then because 14 years of a minimum of 90 days, mostly 130 days, mostly 130 days plus 2 or 3 sessions. Last year was 131 days plus 4 sessions. Yeah.
It takes a toll.
Yeah. And may I add?
Sure.
That now that I've got my garage unpacked from all the times I haven't been able to fully unpack from sessions, I think I have more socks and underwear than anybody else does for Acres.
Well, can you give a couple of big lessons if there was a new legislator sitting in front of you, like any sort of words of wisdom, like just be sure that you remember this?
Yeah, I guess the simple, broad attitude in going into this is really what I've called my 3 R's, and that is relationships. You cannot get anything done without relationships. And to build those relationships is really to maintain your own reputation, make your yays, yays, your nays, nays. If you change your mind on something, go to somebody right away and, hey, I just learned some more additional information. I really can't support you on this, or I learned some more information. I'm totally on board with this. Just always communicate with people, maintain your respect, and then, maintain your reputation, and then respect for others. Respect for their viewpoints, respect for where they come from, respect for who they represent, and respect for the institution. And I see, we use Eastman as an example. I mean, the reason why he doesn't get a whole lot done is he breaks down relationships. The reason why people don't want to work with him is because he has difficulty. And if I was in his situation, even though Oath Keepers may not have been organized, actually there's members of Oath Keepers that may have did the insurrection, but Oath Keepers themselves may not have. I still would have, until the investigation was done, maybe denounced the organization, because my reputation, his reputation is involved in that. And then, of course, respect. And you see the lack of respect of the institution when you don't do stuff like that. So, and again, my goal has always been trying to maintain or to build faith in the institution by at least maintaining respect. And then the last one is one that I've shared with others before, and that is relax. That's my 4th R. Things will work out. Stay cool, stay calm, stay focused. Don't get emotional. Stay solid, and good outcomes will happen. But without having those relationships, without having that dialogue, we are preventing one another. We're preventing us from moving Alaska forward because we're not discussing the issues as effectively as we should.
And the last question, do you have a book that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Yes. So it's interesting to say that, one of Karl Rove's top 10 reading lists is for those who are wanting to make a difference and get community involvement, is Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky. And then he has his book, Reveille for Radicals. Well, in his first book, his prologue going into it says, you can read Reveille for Radicals, but you really need to learn my one rules for, I think one was the 1940s, the other was 1970s. If you really want to know how to make change and how to work within and how to make a difference, do this one. Because when I was younger, reading Reveille for Radicals, it was more obstructionists not working within the systems.
So what's the one we're supposed to read?
Rules for Radicals.
Rules for Radicals.
But I have another book on top of that, and it's written by Stan Howitt, and it's about Saul Alinsky, and it is called Let Them Call Me a Rebel. That's a very good book as well.
Cool. Well, Chris Tuck, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you to Corey Coolidge for making this podcast listenable. Please check out his YouTube channel and website, anchoragelife.net. Thank you to you, our listeners. If you like what you heard today, please subscribe, rate, and review us.